It is. You're good to
Okay.
go.
All right. So thank you for coming to my first art show. A little bit that I kind of want to talk about today is that we have a set of 4 series here that you're looking at. So if you guys do have a map with you, see here. So these 3 paintings on the back behind you, ladies, are what I like to call memories. And they are moments in my life where I have had the most significant impact to me personally. So they are kind of like snapshots where I would take a photograph of a place, or I would ask a friend of mine to take a photograph of a place, and then I would paint it in the image of what I envisioned it at that time, or in that moment. So the actual image doesn't look exactly like this, but it's similar to it. Right? The first one on the far end is the Forest Preserve, and that one was, I believe, done in 2016. The middle one was when I went to Cabos, Mexico, with a trip with my significant partner, boyfriend, and then here was also a time where it was our first anniversary. Those are significant moments of my personal life. Here behind me are what I like to call inner selves, right? And they're depictions of a person that has gone through or is going through depression. So even though they may seem like happy buildings and they're very colorful, they're also very dark at the same time. So on the first piece, it talks about idealize, where it's like a person who's going through depression kind of idealizes a place where they want to have that freedom, that happiness in time, or that place that they wish to gain to. This middle one is like they're trying to keep themselves close together, they're trying to fit themselves into the society where everyone's happy, everyone's cheerful, but they just feel like they're just falling apart. And they don't know what else to go through, they don't know what else to do, so they're just exploding. They're just letting everything out, and in a way they're contaminating everything else around them. This middle one is confusion, where it's like some days we're good, some days we're not good, some days it kind of blends in between, right? And then this final piece right here is the person that is just really severe depression, to the point where in some cases they'll want to just give up and not keep going, right? And that's also in a way where I kind of wanted to draw this because I've personally gone through depression. During the pandemic time, I found myself kind of walking these times, and also during college as well, kind of walking through this path where it's like some days are good, some days are not good, some days I'm trying to reach that place, but it seems so far away. Okay. On this corner right here, where the wall and the 2 angels, well, 3 angels as you see on this side, right? This piece is called Journey. And this piece kind of symbolizes myself going on this journey where it's kind of life is just taking a hold of me and just kind of walking with me along as I travel through this path. But I don't even know where I'm going, so there's no end to this path. It's just a journey that I started from the time that I started college up until even now. Now that I'm a teacher and I'm teaching kids, I'm still on this journey where I'm not sure where I'm going or how to teach these kids. And so I'm still kind of on this path to wherever life takes me. On the back wall, those are watercolor paintings, and those are places, what I like to call dream places, or, well, dream places, that's the title of that series, where it's just kind of like places that I kind of wish that I can travel to. So they're like idealized places, because you know when you think about Paris or you think about France, you kind of idealize them if you've never gone, especially for me coming from a middle income family. I've never gone to these places, and those are kind of places that I kind of wish that I can go to one day eventually. And so I kind of drew them in a way where they're kind of beautiful and almost sparkly, even with the different colors and backgrounds. Sorry. But that's my piece in a whole, and kind of like this. All these 4 little mini series kind of fall under this big this umbrella called Interlife, or I like to call the in-between of life. So in a way, walking from the beginning of my college years up until now, where I've just kind of exposed myself through it all. And that's all I have for you.
You take some questions.
Yes. Any questions? Concerns? Comments? Suggestions? So that's what I like to tell my kids.
It's interesting, the one in the middle. I think before I read the description, I was looking at those black buildings in the background, and it almost felt like the buildings and the paintings on the other side kind of like melting or kind of crushing together. But in this like really beautiful, like, you know what I mean? Like, so there's something kind of really interesting about the contrast between those shapes and this like expanse of water and like the kind of electric, energetic quality of that piece. So I don't know, like it's what those actually were, and it doesn't even bother me that I don't know. It's just something really nice about those shapes and just in the composition of the piece.
So this piece was actually, I took a photo of it on a boat.
Okay.
And so we were like very far away out into the ocean. And this was Cabos. So Cabos is like basically like a whole bunch of, it's kind of like many hills kind of top onto each other. And you see many hotels. And since it's a resort area, there's a lot of different hotels coming, kind of like one here, there. So when you see it so far away, it kind of looks like they're all bunched up together. That's what I kind of tried to really like paint on that piece, like that everything's kind of bunched up. Then I kind of wanted to follow that same water pattern.
That's so interesting though that you said that, Maya, because especially in relation with these buildings here, especially the crumbling ones, it does feel like almost like these are sort of apocalyptic in a way. But then this one doesn't feel apocalyptic but feels related. It's like sort of rebuilding out of, you know, like out of the ashes of the previous culture or something. I mean, if you read them as like buildings sort of crumbling into the ocean themselves or something, that's interesting. I am really interested in the relationship you have between these like dense urban images, right? Like they're not even urban environments because they don't even, like some of them feel more like urban environments than others, but they almost feel like more symbolic of like dense urban, I don't know, imagery, I guess, piled in together. Like that in relation to like these super fertile, you know, like natural kind of spaces where you even have like flowers growing off the surface. I think that's really interesting. I'm not sure how I'm making sense of it entirely yet, like in relation to one another, but I feel like kind of excited by that contrast and that they don't feel oppositional, but they feel like there's some kind of interesting like energy between them.
I think it's also just because, like, you know, the journey, the idea that I'm walking on this journey and it kind of goes to following along with mental health, it just kind of goes together in that sense, where it's like you walk on this path, you see some good stuff in your life, but you also see that bad stuff. You know, you kind of fall and you fall all over again. So I guess in relation to that, I was kind of, these pieces are kind of that first piece right here in the middle with the angel. That was my very first piece that I made. And so thinking about that journey and thinking about where I'm heading in life, it kind of led me to these in a way. Where then I kind of started thinking about, like, where do I live? So I live in a city. What has the city provided for me in a way? So thinking about in that area, it's kind of like I'm in college. I'm in the middle of Chicago. I'm kind of feeling like I'm being drowned down by so much stuff going on in my life. So it's kind of in a way I kind of depicted that in those pieces.
Dhalia, when did you add the ceramic? Are those ceramic flowers?
Yeah,
When did you add those?
I did those with Nana when I took sculpture.
So did you make them with the intent that they would be in the
No,
paintings,
actually.
or they later came together?
They later came together. I've always been fascinated with flowers. I guess the idea of life and growth, and, you know, the fact that they're so versatile that you can plant something and it just spreads out into the open, kind of consuming you. I've always been fascinated with that, with nature in itself. So I did those flowers because it was like a 100-piece project with Nana, where she makes us do 100 little pieces together of the same object. So I chose flowers, and then I hadn't realized it until I had made those that they go really well with these pieces as well. And so I added those just so that I can bring more abundance to the piece. Having those pieces like coming up 3D, it shows a lot more. It comes more together. I feel like it comes more.
Well, it also is like, it communicates that like there's something that like is it actually like exploding outward, like that it's more than the surface can hold, you know, like, or that there's something that is so urgent, which is a strange word to use with flowers, but like, I don't feel a sense of urgency with these paintings, but like, just the gesture is kind of an urgent gesture. Like, we've got, like, this thing is so big that it must come like beyond. It must be excavated out of the work, you know.
And that's kind of how I felt when I was putting these flowers on. As I was like figuring out where to place them and how to like make it seem so that they're bringing them out.
Yeah.
I kind of was just looking at it, and as I'm adding more pieces, it feels like they're just coming off the page and they're coming and they're consuming me, and that's kind of, and I love that idea, so I was like, I'm gonna add more to it.
Yeah.
And like they're almost like the flowers in the garden that you were talking about, that you plant a seed and it spreads. Like, it could be interesting if they even went like out onto the frame and around onto the wall or something. Like, so there's something so full of vitality in that. In this one thing I really love about it is like when I first look at it, I think she's standing, and then I'm looking at it longer and I realize she's actually laying back in the grass because the grass is coming up around her. And there's something really wonderful about the image. I'm just wondering if you could talk about it a little bit and why you chose to have her laying back in the grass. Especially when thinking about this idea of journey and momentum, like, is there something in this posture that feels related to that idea of still journeying forward?
I think that like when I was thinking about these particular pieces, so I have one that she's starting on her journey, so she's on her path, right? She's walking, and she's walking. We get to this piece right here on this side where she kind of gets to a crossroads where she doesn't know where to go, so she's just standing there, right? But once she finally kind of makes that decision, she's just kind of at peace with herself. And it's just kind of like, let me take a rest for a minute, and then let me continue on with the rest of my journey. And then there's a fourth piece, but I didn't get a chance to bring that in. It's still at home and work in progress.
Oh, yeah, you have a really particular pictorial language that you're using. Do you feel like it's coming, where is it coming from? And it's obviously yours, but
I think that, like, me growing up, I've always, so I was born here in Chicago for the most part, but every year up until I was 10, my mom would take me to Mexico. And so I was always there with nature and flowers and that. And she loves flowers, so I kind of got that from her. So every summer she would be out in the garden and she would plant. And our garden would just be huge with a whole bunch of different flowers there. So I guess that also comes from my childhood, being rooted in family, being rooted with flowers, and the fact that my mother loves flowers. It kind of trickled back down to me. But yeah.
So were these flower gardens, were they in Mexico or were they here in Chicago?
They were here in Chicago, but in Mexico, she kind of got that from, you know. She planted as her way of harvesting, so she would go with my grandpa out in the fields and she would harvest with him, and then they would grow like fruit trees there too. So she brought that, like a way of survival over there, she brought that over here and made it in such a thing that's beautiful, you know. So the garden that I've always grown up to, even until now, every summer she still does it. So,
Are you bilingual?
yeah, same.
That makes a lot of sense when I look at these pieces, because there's something about like the possibility of language, that like what can be expressed within one language versus what can be expressed within another. Like both have limitations and both have like really particular, there's like a really particular range of like what you can express with a certain number of words in various languages. And I feel like that's something that like comes out in this kind of like both and thing that's happening. Like you have this like internal memory, external experience, you have like fantasy, you have the future, you have the past, you have real world versus fantasy world, or projected future versus past reality, which is also, the past is also kind of, like there's the fact and there's also the fiction, right?
Yeah.
So like here, I just like, what I really appreciate about, well, first of all, like just a real compliment to like your thoughtfulness with the curation. Like I really love how you've showcased individual bodies that are coming from individual places, but it's so coherent. And also thinking about the walls as this like, this feels like outer facing, and it is the outer facing wall. You know, like there's just something about like how you're thinking about the walls and these groupings that really make a lot of sense and boost the concept like dramatically. Like it's really a huge asset to how we understand your work, and so it's really good. So first there's that, but also I really love like the fact that like oftentimes I feel like we think about nature as the only place where we can really experience like a mountaintop experience, or like an experience with the divine, or and I think we often forget that like our regular world is occupied with a ton of this like creation and nature, you know, whatever word you want to assign to it, like it's around us all the time. Like, and this idea that we have to separate ourselves from humans to experience something that is with us every day is like, it's just been something that's I've been thinking about for the last several weeks. So like, what's your feeling about like that use of linear perspective in this like harsh geometric man-made world versus like the same kind of rules of perspective that are being applied to like spaces that don't contain a lot of architecture? You know, like there's definite difference in your handling of space. I wonder why you return to linear perspectives so much, and like if there's a difference between 1 point and 2 point and what you're expressing in like 1 point versus 2 point versus like just the stacking, you know, there's like just a wide variety of uses of the tool. I guess what is
The reason for why
yeah,
I chose
like what brings you back to it? And
I think it's not. I think it's just. I got to a point in my life where I wasn't sure anymore about these paintings. So I kind of went back and was like, let me go back to the basics of how I started. And so when I was a kid, I did a lot of linear perspective. I was really good at math during my elementary years. So I kind of went back to that, and I picked each one individually based off what I was trying to say or the concept. So for 1 point perspective, it's just kind of like this idealized place. It's like you have one way to go. This is your one-shot place. This is the thing that you have to attain to, like your dream, your aspiration place, wherever it is that you're trying to go to make you feel happy, right? This part right here, the middle part, is kind of like 2 point perspective is usually like you're giving yourself the attention. You are the attention. Like, hear me out. See, like I'm breaking down in front of you. Like, listen to me, you know? While these are just kind of like confusion where it's like, I think they evened out very well. So it's like one days you're good, one days you're bad. And it's both evened out, I guess. To me personally, is how I experienced it. And then on this side, I kind of put it on an angle where it's kind of like, I'm only going to show you what I want to show you.
yeah,
You know? I'm not showing you the full cityscape or the full me. I'm only kind of showing you what I want to portray, how much I want to give you.
yeah.
So that's kind of the reason why I kind of went back to linear perspective a lot.
Yeah.
Part of what's to me so effective about this work is they're using a fairly childlike kind of pictorial language. Not that I don't need to be dismissive. It feels like really, really smart that creators making these things. But they jump way beyond that in terms of psychological, emotional impact. And as such, it feels like it feels easily accessible and yet complex and dense. It's funny because I think I saw all of those being made.
Yeah.
It was really interesting seeing how you're sort of moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And then this was like, what?
Yeah, I got to a point in class where I was like, I don't know about these angel paintings anymore. So I kind of just literally put them to the side, and I was like, let me go back to what I kind of know and I'm familiar with and what I used to love. And so I just kind of literally jumped on a whole different page, and I was like, okay, let's go to these.
Can you talk a little bit about the pieces in the front? Because it knows you're kind of going back to the
Linear perspective, yeah.
So I'm wondering if maybe you can speak a little more about the change in medium for those, also the size, because they're a little more intimate.
So those are more like personalized, so I made them kind of small for me. Also because of the lack of space. I kind of moved to a really small little area at home. So I didn't have much space to work with as far as these big paintings. But these paintings, I chose those sizes in particular because to me, like, those are my dream places, right? So it's close to me, close to how I'm feeling, places that I kind of want to go to. And I chose watercolor because I wanted to create not such a harsh, colorful scene, but more of a dream-like feeling to them. And then I went back to that 1 point, 2 point perspective so that I can go back to something familiar, kind of going back to how I was, and kind of like, what were my dreams then? As a kid, what was my dream? And I kind of came back to who I used to be.
Well, even like the way that they're hung, because those are, so I'm noticing like the frames as I'm looking at different pieces, those particular frames with the matting kind of on that shelf, it feels like it's a mantle or some kind of like, again, like a home kind of space. So even the way that you've decided to hang those and the size and the frame, it's much more intimate. I think that's working really well.
It's one thing that's so interesting is that even though you have roads that exist in these places, there are also other ways in which, like, sometimes it feels like there's no space between the buildings. in both these and these. So I think in some of them, especially in the middle top one over here, but in a couple of these too, like you talk about them as sort of representing you. And some of the buildings almost, like in the second one, the one building kind of represents you in a way. Like there is something in this top middle one too that also almost feels like a crowd of people. Like you lose a little bit of a sense of it being a city with, you know, streets dividing and separating all these buildings from one another, and they almost feel like a group of individuals together. It's interesting.
I hadn't thought of it like that before.
Any questions from students or anyone else? Because I could talk about this more and more.
Well, I'd have to agree with Maya that the frames and the different themes and the different sections really well done. And I like how the different sections you have on this paper here, they do have like different feeling things around it with the frames and the shelf. I think that's really well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I really like how, we talked about this, but stylistically, you really leaned into different parts of what you know about art and what you like about art. And it's really evident, like the difference between the series, but then within the series, they're so cohesive. That's really impressive, because personally, like, that's so hard for me. Like, all my paintings look completely different. And I was like, yeah, that's just props to you. And I loved the framing of those.
Thank
I
you.
love it. It's just, it works really well.
Thank you.
Have your students seen this one?
Some of my kids saw my angel pieces, but I have not seen these. Not yet.
But they're about to start linear perspective.
Yeah, some of those maybe. Some images of those.
What age do you teach?
So I teach 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Okay.
Wow.
One thing that I love about like just transitioning to thinking about teaching and these as like examples of things, like trying to draw something using linear perspective from life is so challenging because you keep getting in the way, like your seeing keeps getting in the way of like your knowledge of the system. And so one thing I love about these is it's such a great way for students, like as examples, for students to enter into a process of linear perspective that can make making something quote unquote realistic, right? Or having deep space within, it can put it within their grasp, right? Without like all of the contradictions that happen between our experience of seeing and using the system of linear perspective. Like by working from the imagination, it actually opens up more possibility of success with the system. And that's not something I've really thought about before seeing this in relation to teaching. And so that seems like something that will really benefit your students.
I agree. Definitely. That's why I kind of want to bring those in and kind of have them show it. It's kind of funny how they think in that way where it's like, oh, I don't think I'll ever be able to do this. And then when you actually show them and walk through the process of this, you just even showing them the basic steps and then them taking it and doing it their own way, kind of leads to that, their own creation at the end of the day. So.
To me, it's really interesting because it's using that basic idea of perspective, but it's also really charged. Pieces that you can actually talk about how sort of the structure connotes certain psychological space. I think it's like a perfect teaching tool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did anyone ever see that, like, it's a short video of just like every time Stanley Kubrick used one-point perspective in his movies and they're all spliced together? If you ever watch it, I recommend watching it on mute because it's like, they put this really dramatic music and it's just too much. But it's like you get what's sliced together so quickly, like The Shining and 2001 Space Odyssey. It's like you get a real sense of like how so ominous and suspenseful and oppressive that perspective is. It's just under his direction. So I don't know. It just that's a perfect example of like using a tool to get to a very specific psychological space.
It's like adding the symbolism to that's something that could be really objective. Like, this is just a view of this, but saying this is having this particular meaning and it's a symbol and stand in as I'm making work. So again, it's just really smart.
Yeah. Any other questions? Concerns? Comments? Well, you're free to run to go and see and look up close.